There was a time in my life where I was a little bit mean. Not cruel, not evil, but sharp, reactive, very defensive. And I think I was calling it strength. I thought reacting fast meant that I was powerful. I thought cutting off people mid-sentence meant that I was confident. I thought if people were intimidated, that meant I was in control. But I wasn't in control. I was in survival mode. And my nervous system was exhausted. And I mistook that edge for personality. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Rebuild Different. I'm Epiphany Paige. And today I want to talk about the version of me that lived in defense mode. And how who you had to become to survive can quietly become who you think you really are. I know we've talked about this before on another one of my episodes, but I think it's important because I lived in anger mode for so long. I wasn't commanding rooms. I was standing in them with my shoulders halfway up to my ears and wondering why people were not coming over to talk to me. My body was closed off, my tone was short, I was quick to react, and I genuinely thought that that was confidence. It wasn't. It was full defense mode. I would wonder why things would escalate so easily, why a lot of my relationships felt tense. But here's what I didn't understand then. When your nervous system is on edge, neutral can feel like a threat. So small things don't register as small. They register as confirmation. Confirmation that you're being dismissed, overlooked, disrespected. And once that story starts, your body sometimes reacts before your logic does. And don't I know it, because I've been in there, so many times. Escalating small things, I think, gave me a sense of control. If I reacted first, then I wasn't vulnerable. If I raised my voice, I didn't have to admit that something hurt. If I made it bigger, then I didn't have to sit in the feeling. And sometimes I wasn't reacting to that moment, I was reacting to the accumulation. Because when you've swallowed enough hurt, you don't explode because of one comment. You explode because it confirms a belief that you're already carrying. And when that kind of intensity becomes familiar, people will adjust around you in accommodation. I remember not so long ago, I was at the club, but I was watching this girl next to me spiral. She was arguing, she was yelling, she was escalating, and her friends were just sitting around her. Not shocked, not scrambling to fix it, not scrambling to try to console her, just letting it happen. It wasn't new. This wasn't a new situation. And then I had this quiet realization. That used to be me. Maybe not always as dramatic, but I recognized that when I was in that state, my reactions weren't surprising to people anymore. And when intensity becomes predictable, people stop pushing back. Not because they agree with you, but because they've learned that it's not worth it. They'll just sit there, let you run the moment, because they know that you're not in listening mode. And that's not power, that's reputation. Okay, so I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I watch that show Baddies sometimes. Not because I admire it, not because I admire it at all. Honestly, it feels like a social experiment. You watch these women fight, physically, almost every episode, verbally, emotionally, and all of it is packaged as entertainment. Most people probably just see chaos, but I see hurt. I see nervous systems that never felt safe. I see women who learned that the only way to survive a room is to dominate it first, to hit first, to yell louder, to never appear soft. And it's definitely easy to judge that energy. But if I'm being honest, I recognize it. Not the fighting, but the bracing. The posture that says, if I'm loud enough, then no one can hurt me. And when chaos is all that you've known, you start to believe that that's as good as it gets. That volatility is power. That intensity is respect. But it's not. It's survival. And survival strategies look pretty entertaining until you realize that they're trauma responses. And here's what was happening in me. My nervous system was dysregulated. Because when you live in fight or flight long enough, your tolerance for ambiguity shrinks. Your interpretation skews negative. Your body reacts before your brain catches up. And that's not personality, that's physiology. But physiology still creates consequences. And I also had to learn something very simple. Tension isn't strength, it's stored threat. Being sharp when I was in that mode didn't make me powerful. Being regulated did. And here's what changed things for me. When I was ready to start my healing process, when I found myself in a position where I wanted to react first, the first thing that I did was pause. Not a dramatic pause, just enough to hear what the person actually said. instead of immediately hearing what I thought that they meant. Because a lot of my reactions weren't to their words, they were to my interpretation of those words. So it started getting to a point where, and if I could feel that I was in a place to respond instead of hurting somebody's feelings, I would say, you know what, I need a minute. And I meant it. Not storming off, not the silent treatment, just learning to recognize that I am not regulated enough to have this conversation right now. And that alone, that right there, changed so much. The second shift was asking myself, does this situation actually require my feedback? Does it actually require my response? Because sometimes you really do just have to let people sit in their stupid if they're trying to rally you up. Not everything needs to be corrected. Not every comment deserves analysis. Not every opinion requires a rebuttal. Sometimes the most powerful move is just to say, I gotta let this one go. Not because you're weak, but because you're regulated. And here's what surprised me. When I stopped escalating small things, the small things actually stayed small. And it wasn't that everyone around me changed. It was that I stopped feeding the fire. And also remember, just because you can win the argument doesn't mean that you actually need to enter it. Everybody's got a slick mouth, we'll understand that one. The mean girl version of Paige was not evil. She was protecting something. But here's something else that I had to sit with. If multiple people are experiencing you in this mode, in this sharp, angry, mean mode, at some point it's not just them being sensitive. It might be you being on edge. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that your nervous system is leading the room. And that's different. So I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize for having standards. But I did start asking, is this power mode or is this defense mode? But I'm still spicy. Don't get it twisted. I'll still say something if something needs to be said, but I'm not braced. My body isn't scanning every room for a threat. My tone isn't loaded before the conversation begins. I don't escalate small things to feel powerful, because real power isn't loud. It's calm, and it doesn't need total domination to feel secure. So if you've ever been the sharp one, the reactive one, the one who makes the room tense, be honest with yourself, but ask yourself what you're protecting, not with shame, but with curiosity. Because who you had to be to survive is not who you have to be forever. And that's what being rebuilt different looks like. Not erasing your past, not pretending you were always healed, but choosing not to live armored. All right, guys, that's another episode of Rebuilt Different. Thanks for watching. If this episode resonated, send it to someone who's out ready to grow that angry, armored version. The version of themselves that once kept them safe. And I'll see you guys next week.